let me ask you a question. Have you ever been on your way to the local Queers for Palestine protest when suddenly a Zionist falls out of the sky and says, actually, Hamas would have you executed for being gay? Many such cases. Well, after this video, you'll be able to tell him that actually Hamas had a gay commander. Okay, in all seriousness, today we're going to be talking about the insane and brutal story of Mahmoud Ishtiwi, the gay Hamas commander. In it, I hope to get you acquainted with the shadowy inner politics of Hamas and introduce you to some of the key Hamas figures, beyond what you might hear about in the headlines.
Wow.
And slight disclaimer, due to this video's very dark subject matter, I'll probably be making less jokes than usual.
Okay.
Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get started.
Thank you.
Now, first off, let's get acquainted with our main character. Mahmoud Ishtiwi was born in 1982 in the Gaza Strip.
Wow.
Now, Hamas, the extremist Islamist organization that rules the Gaza Strip, is extremely nepotistic. Power tends to be concentrated in a few families, and Mahmoud's family, the Ishtiwis, were seen almost as Hamas royalty. Perhaps because of that, when Mahmoud joined the Al-Qassam Brigades, the military wing of Hamas, at the age of 19, he quickly rose through the ranks. Eventually, he became the commander of the Zaytun Battalion, one of, if not the most powerful fighting forces in the Al-Qassam Brigades. Now, life seemed to be going pretty well for Ishtiwi. He was married to 2 wives and had 3 children, who all lived in luxury. His rank was equivalent to brigadier general, and his troops performed exceedingly well during the 2014 Gaza war. But there was one problem. He was gay.
Whoa!
Ishtiwi had,
I didn't
during
even
the
do
course of his career, maintained many relationships with various men in Gaza. Now, it's very likely that many officials within Hamas were aware of Ishtiwi's habits. But due to his extreme usefulness to the group, most of them were willing to look the other way, as long as he continued to be a beneficial asset.
Based.
Perhaps because of this, Ishtiwi came under the false impression that they didn't care about his habits at all, and he began making less of an effort to hide them. But everything changed when a new leader arose in Gaza, one far more brutal and fundamentalist than any who came before him. Yahya Sinwar had felt that Hamas had lost its way. To understand why, we need to go back a bit. Yahya Ibrahim Hassan Sinwar was one of the earliest members of Hamas. He actually started his career running a...
Do you think Hassan will fundraise for them or slink into the background like he did for iDubbbz? If I had to guess, my guess is going to be that Hassan is going to keep his distance from this. Like, he might mention it on stream a few times, but I don't think he'll get involved too directly. I feel like Hassan has been taking a lot of kind of bad hits lately, and it's hard to see, but he just had like a huge push, like probably his biggest PR push ever, with this new little agency he hired that went around doing 20 soft pieces for him recently. And I think he was expecting to get a ton of good publicity and a ton of good stuff from that. But like, the environment right now, I think, has been kind of difficult for him because he's been getting a lot of heat for all the terrorist related shit. Asmongold's community is thriving on Twitch now, and XQC is bending in that direction as well. And both those communities fucking hate Hassan. So he's been taking a lot of hits there. It's not like the iDubbbz stuff didn't really do much. Now all 3 of his orbiters are getting lawsuit nuked. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like life is a little tough for him right now. Ethan and Dan both seem very confident that this is like bankruptcy levels of outcome for these 3 creators. If you had to bet what's the most likely outcome, that it would be bankruptcy level? No, I don't think so. I think the statutory damages are capped unless they get hit with huge punitive stuff, which I doubt would happen. Remember, very few lawsuits in the complaint stage even make it to trial. It's like less than 2% or something, I think. Yeah, I mean, it really depends, I guess, on what Ethan's goal is. But since Asmon is growing in popularity and lefties are getting trashed, do you ever see Twitch making a rightward shift? Like the actual corporate culture? I'm not sure. Twitch as a whole, viewer base-wise, probably already has, if I had to guess. I seriously doubt like the WL community are bastions of like far left or like socially liberal progressive stuff just because of the demographics and everything. And then the Asmongold XQC stuff, these guys are like huge on Twitch. Asmongold is massive, right? And he's super right wing. And then Twitch demographically already leans kind of like young male. So that's already gonna lean in a certain direction. Like, it's just not, yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you would have, I don't know if you would have peg Twitch right now, like the average viewer, where they're at politically. I feel like this is not in the left direction.
Ibrahim Hassan Sinwar was one of the earliest members of Hamas. He actually started his career running a small organization dedicated to weeding out immorality, in particular homosexuality. Sinwar had an obsession with purity, and his game would often burn down video shops that he saw as too scandalous. After joining Hamas, his organization morphed into what became known as Majd. Majd was especially dedicated to hunting down Palestinians who had collaborated with Israel. It would become the Hamas secret police. Now, Sinwar quickly understood that the best way to get people to not collaborate with Israel was by getting the people to fear you. And the best way to get a population to fear you was through public acts of extraordinary violence towards collaborators. Sinwar got Ahmed Yassin, the quadriplegic blind imam who was the supreme leader of Hamas at the time, to issue a fatwa, essentially an Islamic legal degree, that gave Sinwar religious permission to kill anyone he suspected of collaborating with Israel in any way he saw fit. Sinwar immediately got to work. Whenever he found a suspected collaborator, he would kill them brutally, often himself. In one case, he strangled one of them to death while interrogating him. In another case, when a man finally confessed to collaborating, Sinwar said that he wasn't going to kill...
How do you strangle somebody to death while interrogating them? Answer the question. I can't hear you. Say something. Like, what? Hello?
The man. The man was happy for about 2 seconds until Sinwar had the guards bring in the man's brother and force the man to bury his own brother alive. He would often brag about that particular incident. Palestinians started calling Sinwar the Butcher of Khan Yunis and the Man of 12, in reference to the 12 Palestinians he had personally killed. Even the other Hamas leaders were terrified of him. So, I hope we can all agree that Sinwar was a pretty bad person. I mean, hell, his name is literally Sin-War. It's like you asked J.K. Rowling to name a terrorist. But his killing spree came to an end in 1989 when he was arrested by Israel and sentenced to 4 life sentences. In prison, Sinwar was the opposite of a model prisoner and tried to escape over 6 times. He continued having an influential role in Hamas through the use of contraband cell phones that were smuggled into the prison in pretty crazy ways. Sinwar would attempt to have the phones smuggled inside the prison inside of women's underwear or even inside of people's bodies. That second method is actually quite popular. 4 years ago, Israel found a Palestinian attempting to enter a prison with 11 cell phones and 19 SIM cards inside of his lower abdomen.
Excuse me?
Attempting to enter a prison.
What? Like, is that like up your ass, or do they actually, do they like cut like something into their stomach and then hide stuff in like under their skin?
With 11 cell phones and 19 SIM cards inside of his lower abdomen. Yet, Sinwar's luck seemed to run out when he was diagnosed with brain cancer. Doctors estimated that the tumor would kill him within the year, yet for some reason, Israeli authorities decided to save Sinwar's life. Israeli doctors tirelessly worked to remove the cancer. After the tumor had finally been removed, Sinwar's main doctor, Yuval Biton, asked him...
Was it really... I know that he had an operation, I thought, when he was in Israeli prison. It was really brain cancer? Jesus Christ, Israel. What the fuck?
Sinwar if having his life saved by Israel had changed his views on the conflict. Sinwar simply responded that his goals remained the same, the total expulsion of all Jews from Palestine. Biton's nephew would later be murdered on Sinwar's orders during the October 7th attacks. But Sinwar seemed to regain his luck in 2011, when Israel agreed to the Shalit deal. The deal stated that Israel would release over 1,000 Hamas prisoners, including many leaders, in exchange for a single Israeli soldier who had been captured by Hamas. Sinwar was one of the men slated to be released. Now, you'd probably expect Sinwar to be happy about this. After all, the deal was lopsidedly in favor of the Palestinians. Yet Sinwar was furious. He didn't want a deal unless every single Palestinian prisoner was released. He instead wanted Hamas to continue efforts to try and kidnap Israelis in order to free all prisoners. When Biton asked him if he would be willing to kill 10,000 innocent civilians in order to free 100 prisoners, Sinwar told him that he would be willing to kill 100,000. Yet, despite Sinwar's protests, Deputy Hamas leader Salah al-Aruri, who was assassinated at the beginning of this year, agreed to the deal. And after 22 years in Israeli prisons, Sinwar was finally released back to Gaza. When he got back, he returned to a Hamas that had changed completely. I'm just imagining that it went something like this. Ah, Gaza. It's good to be back. Can't wait to cool off at the beach, maybe buy myself a new jacket at the Hitler 2 clothing store, and... Oh my god, Sinwar, you're finally back. You totally slayed those collaborators. Yeah, we're gonna need a purge. Sinwar came back to a Gaza that he felt had gone soft, and there was no bigger example of that to him than Mahmoud Ishtui. Ishtui's gay antics may have been ignored by other Hamas leaders, but Sinwar wasn't about to let that stuff fly. And sure enough, it was only so long before Ishtui was arrested on Sinwar's orders. At first, Ishtui was accused of embezzlement, and they claimed that he had taken Hamas money for himself. But they then claimed that he had used that stolen money to coerce various men in Gaza to engage in sexual relations with him. And they even got Ishtui's neighbor to confess to having sex with him. Through the use of advanced AI algorithms, I was actually able to recreate the interrogation sessions with Sinwar and Ishtui. Here you go.
Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay. You are a transgender.
What shows that I'm gay?
You are a transgender.
Now, the accusations already looked really, really bad for...
Okay, this guy's quite the memer. I'm sorry, this meme is so stupid, but I...
If I snap my fingers, you'll forget that you were ever gay.
I was never gay.
Exactly.
Wait, no, stop.
Yes.
No, stop. You can't. I was never gay.
Okay.
No, I was never gay.
Sure.
You can't just state something and snap your fingers and then be like, I was never gay.
If you say so.
For Ishtui. But many Hamas leaders had an idea. You see, many Hamas commanders had made pretty big mistakes.
Destiny is my biggest hear me out character low-key.
During the 2014 Gaza war. The biggest of which was when the location of the Hamas military chief, Mohammed Daif, was leaked, and his house was bombed by Israel. His whole family was killed, and Daif was severely injured. Now, it's very likely that the bombing of the house was just a result of good Israeli signals intelligence, but Daif was fully convinced that there was a traitor inside of Hamas who had been sabotaging
Uh-oh. Got it.
Hamas operations for years. Daif desperately wanted someone to blame for the deaths of his family. Now, every Hamas commander who had somehow messed up in the war knew that they might one day be accused by Daif of being the traitor. But they now had a solution. Ishtui was a dead man walking. Sinwar would make sure of that. But multiple Hamas commanders realized that if they could pin all of their failures on Ishtui and then kill him, like some sort of Hamas Jesus, Daif would assume that Ishtui had been the traitor the whole time, and they would no longer have to worry about being accused of being the traitor. So the moment word got out about Ishtui's arrest, multiple Hamas commanders came forward to Sinwar and accused Ishtui of some frankly ridiculous stuff. Here are just a few accusations. According to the allegations, Ishtui had sexual relations with over 50 men in Gaza. In order to generate hush money to keep it a secret, he turned to an interesting strategy that I call the Sneako grind set. He would bring his wife to parties with high-ranking Hamas members and have them pay him to sleep with her.
Jesus.
In addition to that, he was accused of collaborating with Israel over the length of many years. According to the allegations, he had been the one who had given Israel Daif's location in 2014. He was also accused of mass embezzlement and of running an illegal weapon market in Gaza. He was essentially accused of every single crime under the sun. Hell, they probably claimed that he shot Harambe. The charges seemed pretty damning. All they needed now was a confession. And that is where the torture began. In the maze of labyrinthine tunnels under the Gaza Strip, Ishtui was subjected to some of the most brutal tortures imaginable. We know about what happened to him mainly through letters that he would smuggle out, which would find their way to Human Rights Watch. I link the Human Rights Watch report on Ishtui in the description if you feel like reading it, but I warn, it's really not for the faint of heart. In the notes, Ishtui wrote, "Often 4 men would stand around me while I was suspended in the air and would swing me right and left, forward and backwards, for hours. I was tied for an average of no less than 20 hours and sometimes more than 24 hours. I received hundreds of lashes. I was beaten, tied, stripped of my skin, humiliated, spat on, and had a bag placed over my head, and all this without them having a shred of evidence."
Did you read the Ethan lawsuit complaints, by the way? I read through the Denims one and was surprised that a lot of it revolved around Hassan, despite him not being an actual party. And if you read it, was wondering if you had thoughts about it. I haven't read through the complaint now, but the complaints are like 80 plus pages long. Those are some long complaints. They seem pretty memey, but...
After every torture session, he would be asked to confess. He had 2 main interrogators. He said that Sinwar was the good cop, and that Sinwar's brother Muhammad was the bad cop. And the fact that Muhammad makes Yahya Sinwar look good by comparison really tells you everything you need to know about him.
How do you square away our intelligence agencies saying Iran was not seeking a nuke? Obviously, you believe Israel's intel over ours, right? I don't know if I would believe Israel's intel over ours. I'm not even sure if Israel's intelligence is saying that Iran was like building a nuke. I think the idea, the concern is over the level of uranium enrichment. Everything else is just word games and red herrings. Like, I think Tulsi Gabbard said that she didn't believe they'd restarted the nuclear program from 2003, which I don't know why. Is that the only nuclear program they start? And then whether or not they're building a bomb or not. But the building the bomb part is trivial. I think the big part is the huge levels of enriched uranium that they have.
As bad as Yahya Sinwar was, his brother was a true psychopath and sadist. To get an idea of just how bad Mohammed Sinwar was, one time after Ishtui launched a failed escape attempt, Sinwar beat Ishtui for 4 hours straight until Ishtui was unconscious. He then blindfolded Ishtui and threw him in a hole in the ground. Mohammed told Ishtui that this was his grave that he had prepared for him and that he should get used to it because he'd be spending the rest of eternity in it soon enough. Ishtui would later state the beatings he got on that day would cause his urine to permanently change color. But like I said before, Ishtui's family was like Hamas royalty, so his sister Samia was allowed to come and visit him in the tunnels. When Samia saw her brother looking absolutely destroyed from the beatings, she asked the guard if he had been tortured. And of course, the guard denied that any torture had taken place.
Can you do the Stephen Hawking's pose, the same way you did in Ethan Klein's lawsuit video? My best Stephen Hawking's pose. Rest in peace, Reckful. What is this? There's more, right? Where's the full Stephen Hawking? There's like a clip of it on LSF or my subreddit or something.
What are you guys talking about? You've been gnomed? Yeah, I got gnomed. Nice posture. Okay. I actually have to pee again because of my
Base.
Spoke with her brother, he just lifted up his palm, showing the word Mazlum written on it, meaning unjustly wronged, essentially confirming that he had been tortured. He also said that if he would be murdered, he would leave a sign to prove it. Now, this whole time, Ishtui's mother had been meeting with Hamas supreme leader and multi-billionaire Ismail Haniyeh. And by the way, fun little fact about Haniyeh, he actually has multiple nephews in the Israeli army. Talk about awkward family reunions. Anyway, in the meetings, Haniyeh was dismissive that Ishtui was in danger and claimed that Sinwar would eventually let him go free. But when Ishtui's sister went to visit Mahmoud for the final time, she could see...
The main problem with Iran and enrichment is the auto-launch theory, which is the idea that as soon as Iran gets a nuclear weapon, they will immediately use it on Israel. If you think about the threat of World War III, American interference in Ukraine, Iran is the same aggression but without nuclear weapons. I don't think Iran would use the nuclear weapon. I don't know if anybody actually believes that. I don't even think even Israel thinks that. The issue is once they get a nuclear weapon, it solidifies that regime. It makes regime change incredibly hard. It dramatically discourages attacks directly on Iran. And it gives them a whole bunch more legitimacy in the region that is going to be incredibly difficult for anybody to contest. I think those are the main fears. I think that's the main fear with Iran having a nuclear weapon.
See that he was at his breaking point. It was during this meeting that he managed to sneak her a note, which detailed all the torture that he had been subjected to by Sinwar and his men. Later that day, his sister walked into Haniyeh's house. Like usual, Haniyeh greeted her cheerfully and asked what he could do for her. And she basically said, cut the crap, Haniyeh, and showed him the documents that claimed that Ishtui...
We definitely think they would bomb us. Why wouldn't they? Why would they? It would be suicidal. Isn't the issue that Iran would supply nukes to terrorists? I don't know how likely or possible that is, or how that would work. It would have to be some platform. They would have to be provided weapons that they could launch it from. Although maybe Hezbollah already has that. I don't know what transporting nuclear weapons is like in terms of how visible that is to people. I'm not sure. So why do you support the Israeli strikes? It seems like we're on the same page on everything except this part. Because I don't think that Iran should enjoy blanket immunity from ever being attacked. I think Iran is a terrible nation that is conducting way too much foreign interference, basically with impunity, and nobody in the international community does anything about it or gives a fuck. I think that they represent an immense threat to U.S. and global interests in the region. And anything that strengthens or solidifies the grip that country has on the region and the ability for them to meddle in foreign affairs across that region, I think is all bad. I think all of those things are bad. So I think preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, I think, is a worthwhile reason to attack them or stop them from doing so. How do you know that regime change will lead to a better leader? I don't know if regime change would lead to a better leader. I don't think regime change is the best idea ever. I think regime change could theoretically introduce a ton of instability in the region. I'm not necessarily a big fan of regime change. I just don't think they should have a nuclear weapon.
He was being tortured by Hamas men. Haniyeh instantly froze and his face went white. The details of the torture weren't supposed to have gotten out. Haniyeh abruptly ended the meeting and excused himself. That night, the Ishtui family got a knock at the door. Samia opened it and found herself face to face with Sinwar, who had a gun pointed at her. Sinwar walked into the house, still pointing the gun, and said to her that she should stop poking around or she would end up like her brother. Then he walked out into the night.
Okay, so we just roll the dice then. That is what you are saying. That's not an intelligent question. Think about what I'm saying. Think about what you're saying and then try again. Do you think mutually assured destruction means the same thing to a jihadist state? I don't analyze the region like Sam Harris does. I've never found a reason to, and I've never found that to be a good predictor or explainer for any of the actions, so I don't view it as Islam, Muslim, LOL, here's this. So.
But the Ishtui family wouldn't be threatened. They demanded another meeting with...
Destiny, stupid take. Instead of engaging in diplomacy, let's do war. I have no problem engaging with diplomacy. That's why I supported the JCPOA. That's one of my big criticisms about Donald Trump. It's one of my big criticisms about Netanyahu. I think diplomacy should always be the first stop. But I mean, it seems like diplomacy is not possible with current U.S. leadership. And if Iran wants to take advantage of that by building a nuclear weapon, that's Iran's prerogative. I don't even necessarily blame them for doing it, but of course we should do everything to stop them from doing it. And if we don't have the ability to negotiate diplomatically, then we negotiate with bombs. Why is Israel attacking now and not when the IAEA report came out? Surely it has nothing to do with the Israeli parliament holding a vote to dissolve the government a week ago and Netanyahu's position weakening. I mean, that maybe that could be influencing Netanyahu's ideas. I don't know how long in advance these strikes were planned. It sounds like, based on the extensive bombings and the extensive information and intelligence they had in Iran, it sounds like this has been in the works for quite a while. So I don't think that this was just a instantaneous, flip of the switch thing. It also could have been that I think the U.S. said, didn't they have a 60-day negotiation going on with Iran, and they did these bombings when the negotiations ended? So,
But the Ishtui family wouldn't be threatened. They demanded another meeting with Hania, but Hania refused to meet with them. They then organized a protest outside of Hania's house, but it was brutally dispersed by Hamas police. When that didn't work, they had a different idea. They contacted Khalid Mashal, the multi-billionaire former leader of Hamas who now resided in Syria. Now, Mashal actually has an absolutely insane life story that involves the Mossad essentially killing him with a deadly dose of superfentanyl shot out of a Spider-Man web shooter, and after that, reviving him from the dead. If you want me to make a video explaining the absolute insanity that was the Mashal job, let me know in the comments. Anyway, Mashal was seen as much more of a pragmatist compared to other Hamas leaders, and he didn't like Sinwar that much. Because of that, the Ishtui family thought that he might be a useful ally in their fight to free Mahmoud. They spoke with Mashal, and he told them that he was confident he would be able to free Mahmoud. In parallel to that, Mahmoud's mother released a tearful video in which she begged Hamas military commander Daif to release her son. She said that in the past she had saved Daif's life and now asked him to pay her back. She revealed that she was dying of cancer and begged Daif to let her see her son one more time before she died. But it was too late. That night, Sinwar came to Ishtui and told him that if he confessed, he would only get a few years in jail. Ishtui, who was completely broken and couldn't take any more torture.
would you consider these questions you're getting now Israeli derangement syndrome? Everybody's deranged about the Middle East. People have stupid thoughts about all of it. People that are obsessed with Islam and jihads, and people who are obsessed with Israel and Jewish conspiracy, and people who are obsessed with Western shit is all dumb.
Finally confessed. But Sinwar had
Can you speak more to your difference in analysis from Sam Harris? He seems keen on speaking to the unique nature of Muslim fundamentalism. Yeah, Sam Harris is super, in my opinion, brain broken on the Muslim stuff. But you can't explain everything you can't explain the dynamics of the Middle East by just obsessing over Islam. Iran stands in opposition to a ton of other Muslim majority nations. I don't think Iraq is as friendly with Iran. Like, it's just, you have to have a better framing than just LOL religion.
Sinwar came to Ishtui and told him that if he confessed, he would only get a few years in jail. Ishtui, who was completely broken and couldn't take any more torture, finally confessed. But Sinwar had lied, because the moment he confessed, Sinwar did a quick and secret sham trial and officially condemned him to death for homosexuality. Ishtui was executed with 3 gunshots to the chest.
Damn.
His body was returned to his family, and they were told that Ishtui had died during a hunger strike. His family didn't really buy that, considering, the 3 holes in his chest. And sure enough, upon further examination, they found that he had carved the word Mazlum into his leg, his way of saying that he had been innocent. Now, in every English source, this is where the story chief, Mohammed Daif.
Sorry. Do you not think it is in Iran's interest to develop nukes? Why does every analysis always start from Israel's point of view and not Iran? Didn't I literally just say, I understand why Iran? I thought I just said that literally earlier. Yeah, it is in Iran's interest to develop nukes, for sure. It's also in Israel's interest and our interest to stop them, yes.
It goes way deeper than I realized. Because remember, upon further examination, they found that he had carved the word Mazlum into his leg, his way of saying that he had been innocent. Now, in every English source, this is where the story ends.
At Destiny, those are the results of the Shia-Sunni divide. Yes, I know, every white guy in the West loves to talk about this. But you are still framing Iran nuking Israel as suicidal and therefore unlikely, even though October 7th was just as suicidal, but still happened. October 7th wasn't necessarily suicidal. Remember, they took hostages, and they took hostages for a reason, probably because Hamas thought they would have some kind of stronger negotiating position or something, I guess. Also, October 7th wasn't done directly by Iran. It was done through a proxy. People that are operating through proxies, in my opinion, definitionally, are not suicidal. ISIS wasn't using proxies. ISIS was taking credit for things and attacks directly. Same thing with Al-Qaeda. They're not like, we have to attack through proxies so that we can maintain some plausible deniability like Iran does. Iran doing that, in my opinion, demonstrates some level of rational self-interest, some kind of non-suicidal mentality. Otherwise, they would just do it themselves.
But by doing some digging on some really sus Arabic websites that probably gave me viruses, I realized that this story goes way deeper than I realized. Because remember, Mahmoud was a popular commander in Hamas, and the Ishtuis were a very powerful Hamas family, so Sinwar killing him got quite a few people angry. So in the days following the death of Ishtui, a new group made its first appearance in Gaza. A group that styled itself the Free Qasemite Brigades, or the FQB, essentially broke off from Hamas. They released a statement where they strongly condemned the killing of Ishtui and demanded that Sinwar get handed over to them for judgment. But most interestingly, the FQB declared allegiance to Khalid Mashal, and this is where things finally started to make sense to me. You remember when Mashal said that he would help free Ishtui and then proceed to do absolutely nothing? Well, Mashal never wanted to free Ishtui. He wanted Ishtui to die and become a martyr and then use his death to essentially lodge a soft coup against the rising power of Sinwar. It was something unprecedented in the history of Hamas. But here's the weirdest part. Not long after this, the FQB disappears completely from the historical record. So my guess as to what happened would be that the Free Qasimite revolt was swiftly crushed by Sinwar. Anyway, Ishtui's story of torture and execution isn't actually out of the ordinary for Hamas. Ishtui was just the most famous example of it. And Palestine still remains one of the worst places to be gay in the world. Well, you might be saying, of course Gaza is going to be bad, but what about the West Bank, where Hamas isn't in charge? Well then, let me tell you about Ahmed Abu Mukhia. Ahmed was a gay Palestinian from the West Bank town of Hebron. He fled from his hometown out of fear and got asylum in Israel, where he lived his life. After many years, he decided to return to his hometown. When he got there, the villagers actually befriended him. Oh wait, did I say befriended? I meant beheaded. And it was posted on social media and everything. Anyway, I think the moral of Ishtui's story is the same as the moral of Lincoln's story from my last video. No matter how much you stick up to these authoritarians, they're still going to hate you at the end of the day.
Okay. I don't know what the point of this was, but we watched it. Here we go.